Today is Monday, February 10th, 2025, and this is William Michael, the headmaster of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. A few years ago, my eldest daughter, surprised my wife and I when she decided that she wanted to join the Army. My eldest son had joined, and he was doing well. But we didn't expect my eldest daughter to be interested in a military career because she was very good in school and she was already beginning to pursue what appeared to be her future vocation, which was in medical services. She was already working as an EMT when she was 18 years old. She had the spirit and the courage of a first responder, and it just seemed like she was going to head in that direction and then into college, possibly to medical school and so on. So to find her interested in a military career was, for us, a surprise. Fortunately, we were close friends with the local Army recruiter, and we were able to get some good feedback and advice from him on what her options might be, and she chose to pursue training as a combat medic, which for us made perfect sense. In our town where we live, in rural North Carolina, girls aren't supposed to join the military. And so my daughter received some discouragement from a number of different sources, basically suggesting to her that women don't belong in the military, a feeling that's probably pretty common, especially among old-fashioned Christian men. The problem with this opinion, however, is not that the military shouldn't accept women. The problem is that women can outperform many men in the military. My daughter, for example, is very bright, very fit, very strong, very determined, very healthy. And if there's an open contest for men and women, my daughter won't beat the best men, but she'll beat many of the men. She'll beat all the weak men. She'll beat all the lazy men. She'll beat all the careless, silly men. She'll beat many men. She will be more qualified and more competent than many modern men. And so the real problem with women in the military is not that the military creates another set of standards, or that women don't belong in the military, or that women aren't qualified for the military. The problem is that modern men are the ones who are actually not qualified for the military. I learned at a recent military event for one of my other children that only 23%, I think that was the number, only 23% of American young adults are eligible for military service. The young men in our country are not eligible for military service. And the reason why they're not eligible is not because they don't have the potential. We're not talking about crippled people. We're not talking about mentally handicapped people. We're talking about ordinary Americans. The reason why they're not eligible for military service, first of all, they don't have enough education, even though all that's required is a high school diploma. They can't physically qualify to enter military training. I didn't say they can't qualify to be Navy SEALs or Army Rangers. I said they can't qualify to enter into basic training because of the physical condition of their bodies. They already have criminal records. They already have drug use problems. They may be covered with tattoos. There are a number of different things, but only 23% of young Americans are eligible for military service. Now, as I said before, you can take the strongest young men, and no women will be able to compete with them. The problem, however, is when you start getting into the weaker men, you start going down the list, getting to weaker men, we begin to find women who can beat them, women who are stronger than them, women who are more fit, more determined, more intelligent than them. And so women are capable of bumping men out of their spots in the American military. That's not necessarily a credit to women. It's really a humiliation for men. And I'm speaking generally here, consciously. When we look at these two different genders, we can say, well, St. Paul said that women are the weaker vessels. And that's true, speaking generally of the two genders. However, when we speak of individual men and individual women, we find that these two genders overlap. And there are women, individual women, who are stronger than men, and men who are weaker than women. And so when we look at the military, this is what we see. We see the highest level of military training usually restricted to men, not by rule, but by fact. There are very few female Navy SEALs, if any. There are very few, if any, Army Rangers who are females. I believe I've heard that there are a few who have actually completed the training. But when we get to the highest levels, the women disappear. And only men can meet those highest levels of physical and mental demands. We see the same thing in sports. We see in the NBA or the NFL or pro baseball, we don't see any women anywhere close to those leagues. And yet, most men would not qualify to play in the WNBA. Those women would beat them up and kill them in basketball. So we see the genders overlap in terms of strength and ability. We can say that women are weaker, generally speaking. We can say that men are stronger, generally speaking. But individually, we cannot say that all women are weaker than all men, or that all men are stronger than all women. Individually, they overlap. This same phenomenon, this situation that's caused not so much by the strength of women, but by the weakness of men, the same thing is going to happen on a broader human level as artificial intelligence and bots that run on artificial intelligence continue to develop. And the topic that I'd like to talk about is the fact that bots are coming. Bots that are powered by artificial intelligence, they're coming, and they are going to humiliate modern men. They're going to humiliate modern men in the same way that strong women can humiliate modern men. But when I talk about bots, I'm talking about men indiscriminately, male and female. Artificially intelligent bots are developing, and they are going to humiliate modern men. And I'd like to talk about why that is, and I'd like to talk about what I think the short-term and long-term effects may be, because I think there's some bad news and some good news. Now, we've lived in a generation that's been troubled by DEI policies and practices, the attempt to force people into roles for which they're not objectively qualified, for some political or social agenda. We try to force women into certain roles. We try to force different races into certain roles. Even handicapped people, we try to force them into certain roles. And we say, by doing this, we're going to create a culture marked by equality. And yet what we experience is a culture that's marked only by incompetence. We see so many areas of American life, even at the highest level of government, that are embarrassingly plagued by this idea of what was formerly called affirmative action, but is now called DEI, which I'm pretty sure stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. This idea of including people who in a meritocratic society would not be in these places, but are being artificially placed into these places for these political or social or whatever else philosophical goals that people may have. And so we've had to experience this DEI craziness. And in the last presidential election in 2024, we saw America vote to say, we've had enough of this stuff. And we see President Trump working to eliminate DEI policies from political offices, and yet they remain in many other places, in many other spheres, and it's a real plague. But the problem that I see is that the younger generation has grown up in this DEI society. Those who are talented and strong feel almost as if they should be embarrassed by their strength, by their potential, by their education, by their culture, by their connections, and so on. They've been trained to think that these things are sources of embarrassment, things they should be ashamed of. And many people who have no qualifications, nothing to commend them, no connections, no education, imagine that they deserve the highest and most influential places in society. So it's this culture of absolute upside-down craziness. The only hope that there is that this will be undone is, first of all, with respect to government, that people will just vote against it, which I think we're beginning to see. And then in the market, that people will act against it when it's time to spend money. That people simply won't support businesses that run like this. They simply won't agree to settle for terrible service from incompetent workers and who are paid at rates they don't deserve. The customers will simply say, no, we are not going to support this stuff. We'd like to go out to dinner and actually have a pleasant meal. We really don't want to have our dinner served to us by a guy who identifies as a girl with body tattoos and his nose pierced. We really don't want that at the dinner table. We'd like to have a respectable waiter or waitress. The market can get rid of DEI if it chooses to. Or everyone can pretend that they like this idea and just live with high prices and incompetent services and low quality products. But it looks like politically there is beginning to be pushback, and I believe that it's only a matter of time before the market begins to push back as well. I think the politics is going to lead the market. But what the problem is that I was talking about is that the younger generation has been raised in this DEI culture, and they're crazy. The whole generation is upside down and backwards. They don't study, they don't work, they don't think ahead, they're not responsible, they're not just, they're not religious. We can go down through the whole list of all of the faults of this next generation, because they've all been influenced by this DEI mentality. It's similar to what happens in communist countries where strong, talented men lose the natural motivation to study and work. When you know that if you study and you exert yourself and you are industrious and resourceful and you solve problems and you build solutions, but you will not see any of the reward for any of that work, the natural motivation for it is lost. And men just sort of lose ambition that should be present with them by nature, the desire to be successful and to be wealthy and to prosper and to gain recognition for legitimately honorable work. That motivation is lost, and the talented and strong men in society don't fulfill their potential. We see that in communist societies, and we see that in DEI culture. We see that the strong and those with great potential just see that the policies are against them, and so they say, it's not worth it. It's just all going to be political. It's not going to be a contest of talent or ability or diligence. It's going to be a contest of quota numbers and political ambitions. And so it discourages all of the natural ambition, all the natural motivation in a society. And we see the younger generation with this. Those who are incompetent and unqualified, imagining that they deserve everything, and those who actually have the potential to do good, embarrassed by that potential. It's an upside down generation that's really been hindered by the messaging that has come from the government and the media and the market down to the people. It's comparable, like many of these things, it's comparable to the scene where Theoden, the king in Lord of the Rings, has Wormtongue in his ear, just talking him down, talking him down, talking him down, so that he believes he actually has no power and can't do anything to stop the evil, when in fact there's no reason for him to think like that at all. He's simply allowing this talk of Wormtongue to weaken him or to cause him to imagine himself to be weak. And it takes a visit from Gandalf to drive Wormtongue away from him and rouse Theoden to step up and fulfill his role as king and lead his people into battle against the wicked. We see that a great illustration of this problem in The Lord of the Rings. So we've got a real problem, especially in the younger generation. It's really depressing to watch healthy, potentially happy, talented, strong Christian kids just beaten down by modern society and made to act as if they need to live as ghetto children in order to be good. Anything they do, anything they say, any pride in their own family or tradition or ancestry is all labeled racism, and they're terrified of being so labeled because that's like the scarlet A in this society. You've got to confess things that you don't believe. You've got to confess that homosexuality, transgenderism, all of this stuff is all wonderful and everything is good, and traditional religion and philosophy and education and culture and family life are all bad and embarrassing. And that's how these kids are pressured in this generation. Now, I believe that the end of this is near. Because what happens is, when these political things develop in democratic society, and they develop by democratic means, it's by numbers of foolish people being manipulated to give power to people who don't deserve power. The actually powerful people, the wise and talented people, when they see this happening in society, they just go to work quietly. They choose not to go stand in the middle of the street where they're outnumbered. They choose not to fight against things politically. They choose not to try to go through all the normal channels of corporate promotions and or college careers and things like that, because they're all corrupted by this what's being called wokeism. You've surely heard that phrase. But the talented, the wise, the virtuous, in the face of these problems, what they do is they just withdraw and go to work quietly. And what happens is, beneath the surface, behind the scenes, things begin to develop. The talented, the wise, the industrious begin to work and develop solutions in the quiet. And they slowly and quietly develop unnoticed until they finally break out. And we're on the verge of one of these outbreaks of the work of wise and industrious individuals who are as much a counterculture as can be imagined. And we see this with Donald Trump winning the presidential election and bringing this younger group of techno nerds, this group that we see working with Elon Musk, who's the king of the techno nerds, working with this Department of Government Efficiency to just break this whole thing into pieces. We see the technology is going to destroy this artificial world that's been created by these anti-Christian, anti-human views of culture, these political ambitions in democratic society. Artificial intelligence, I believe, is going to humiliate modern human beings. And here's what I think is going to happen. And it compares to what has happened with women in the military. If all men studied and worked to fulfill their potential, computers and machines, artificial intelligence, and so on would not be able to compete. There might be some tasks that machines could be trained to do, but if men were wise and virtuous and hardworking, there'd be no competition. We wouldn't even think of machines. But when men are difficult to work with, when men are lazy, when men are ignorant, when men don't study, don't work, don't like to work, want to be paid more than they deserve to be paid, don't care about whether their work is profitable or sustainable, they just have their minds filled with all kinds of crazy ideas by usually politically charged people. When the workers become obnoxious to the employers, to the people who actually own the resources and solve the problems and have the wisdom and knowledge to create work for others, the leaders, the employers, are tempted to replace useless workers. And it's this void that's created. It's this vexation that's created by the workers that causes the employers to look to technology, to look to new strategies, and so on. And this is what we see happening. The leaders of different fields, the leaders of different industries, political leaders, business leaders, leaders in education, and so on, don't want to be bothered by this modern workforce. And so they're looking to see how this modern workforce can be circumvented, how they can just get around it, how they can find help from other sources. Now, machines have obviously been an answer. I can testify to that. I can hire people to do work for me, or I can just get some equipment and go do it by myself. The equipment making me capable of doing the work that I would be paying workers to do. But when you try to find workers, you find men who they don't show up, they don't do what they said they would do, they charge too much, they do half the job and begin to lose interest. You get to a point where the old saying is found true: if you want something done right, you need to do it by yourself. And so we turn to other things. We go out and buy equipment, we buy tools, we buy a tractor for the farm, we buy our own mowers and equipment, and we just replace those unnecessary sources of frustration in our lives. Men who don't study, men who don't work, create their own problems. They create this vacuum of valuable work that then gets filled by another option and puts them out of work. We've seen this in the past with simpler machinery, but we're seeing it now with the development of artificial intelligence and more importantly, the bots and tools that are going to be running with this artificial intelligence to actually do important tasks. Now, like women in the military, we could say, well, are these bots, are you telling me that artificial intelligence, like a computer run by artificial intelligence, is as smart as humans? And the answer is no. The smartest humans, the wisest humans, I should say, are more intelligent than any bots, than any computers. Yes, bots can have lots of trivia, they can have lots of operations they can perform, they can work very quickly, but there are things that bots cannot do that only humans can do, at least for now. Human beings who strive to fulfill their potential are greater than computers and machines and bots, even those powered by artificial intelligence. The greatest humans, those who fulfill their potential, will not be competed with when it comes to computers or artificial intelligence, bots, and so on. The problem, however, is that when we begin to look at bots and look at artificial intelligence, we begin to see that a bot can handle, let's say, 60% of what a man can handle. We can take a smart, resourceful, creative, industrious man and say he can do 40% more than a bot can. The bots can't compete with him. He can use bots as assistants, but bots can't do what he can do. Bots are only capable of, and I'm just making this number up, 60% of what men can do. The problem is that that's only true of strong men. That's only true of wise men. Once we come down the list, we find that men do not live to fulfill their potential. They do not study. They do not work. Those men are inferior to the bots. And this is where change is going to come. Those men are watching television, playing, wasting time, sitting around the house in the evenings. They don't study. They've got basic education, the minimal, whatever was required. That's what they got. They've got very little significant experience in any area. They're content to just go find a job, to get a paycheck, and then they'll go every day, punch in, punch out, take their sick days, take their vacation days, do the bare minimum that's required for their job, and tell themselves that this situation is going to last forever when they know it's not going to last forever because their bosses are constantly working to eliminate the need for those kinds of workers. So men who don't strive to fulfill their human potential, they create an opportunity for computers and machines and artificial intelligence and bots to come in and compete for their jobs, for their activities, for their fields, and so on. And this is what's going to happen. The bots that are being developed, and I know because I'm already using them. I'm already beginning to train and work with bots that are trained by me and supplied with instructions by me, just like employees or assistants would be. They're trained by me, but the difference is that all of the human trouble of dealing with a worker is eliminated. When I give the instructions, the bot will do exactly what I tell it to do. It'll do it 24 hours a day. It'll do it at a fraction of the cost of a person who will have his own opinion, who will often question what I tell him to do, even though he's my employee, who will work if he's supervised, who will work a few hours a day and spend the majority of his day not working, who won't be working when I'm working, and who won't really care if what I ask him to do is done well. He's there to pay eye service and to get his pay. He's got to be paid for everything and will do nothing without pay. He's not interested in improving the company. He's not really interested in helping me. He's interested in just doing the minimum that's required to get a paycheck. The bots offer me better help than those men. And so I'm already working, even as strange as it may sound, I'm a classicist, I work in education, but I'm already working with bots, and the experience has been amazing to see how they can help, how they can be used, what they can do. And I'll explain it really simply. You might think that bots and software programs and computers can't do what a man can do, but what a man can do is impressive because it's often complex actions. So a man can do a number of things. He can read and talk and type. He can think, he can judge, he can plan, he can do all these different things. He can handle complex activities. But those complex activities can be broken down into simple activities. And when we look at those simple activities, we find that most of them can be handled by bots or by machines. It's just like the assembly line. When Henry Ford looked at the production of cars, he said, this is a very complicated product that we're making here. But if we focus on every individual step of the manufacturing process and lay out all of those steps, none of those steps is particularly difficult or complicated. They're actually very, very simple individual steps. So if we can break the car manufacturing process down into individual steps and just lay them out along an assembly line, we can very easily produce a car with no skilled workers, with very simple tasks. And over time, we can replace these workers with machines. And over time, we can replace these human-directed machines with more intelligent machines, and on and on. That process of dividing the task into simpler tasks and then automating those simpler tasks is what allows artificial intelligence and computers and machines to do what men can do. And as I said, I've already been working with this, and the applications, and again, this is just getting started. The applications are already incredible. And I can already see that schools and so-called teachers they're just not going to be able to compete once these things get going. Education is going to be largely free because the bots are going to be able to do everything that paid teachers can do by breaking it into individual tasks, but they can do it faster, they can do it around the clock, they can do it more intelligently because most teachers are not intelligent. And they can do it at a fraction of the price, if not almost for free. So what's going to happen in, I think, every different area of life, every different industry, is that the ability of the bots to work, what they are able to do is going to set a new bar for what it means to work productively in society. The bots are going to set the bar. If your work capacity is equal to or less than that of the bots, you're going to be in trouble. I didn't say if it's less than the bots, because if your work capacity is similar to the bots, you're going to be in trouble because the bots are going to do what you can do at a fraction of the cost that you're willing to do it for. So if you're even close to the bots in terms of work capacity or intelligence, you're in trouble. The bots are going to create a bar for what it means to work. And only people who can work at a level of competence that's above that bar are going to be employable. Only men who can work above the bar that bots are going to establish are going to be employable men. They're the only men who are going to be valuable in the job market. What's going to happen to all of those other men? I don't know. We already see some ideas that politicians are proposing. Most tech leaders, thinking optimistically, say that when the bots raise the bar and eliminate all these men from their jobs, new jobs are going to develop. There's going to be a new generation of jobs that's going to develop after this change takes place, and those men will move into those jobs. As I said, that's optimistic, because you see that there's no reason why the bots can't move into those jobs. And they surely will if they're already successful in the first set of jobs. The more realistic view, which I think is coming from politicians, the more realistic view is that the bots, the technology, and the highly skilled human workers are going to produce a prosperous and efficient society. There's going to be, like Trump talks about the golden age of America. There's going to be something of a material golden age, an age of prosperity that's driven by the best human workers and these bots, all of this technology with artificial intelligence as assistants to the best and wisest men. And they're going to create a prosperous economy. And there's really no use for all of the sub-bot humans. And so what politicians are proposing, and you've probably heard this, is some kind of universal income that's simply given to citizens. So the bots will do the work. The machines will do the work. We'll only need a small number of really talented humans who actually work at a super bot level. They'll be able to handle all the work, and they will produce an abundance of resources. And the rest of the people, the best thing to do with them is to just give them what they need. Just give them their food and clothing. Just give them a fixed, what's called universal income for them to live on, because we really don't need them to work. It's better to have them just stay out of the way. And that's being proposed as the future. So you've got the optimistic view, which is that there are going to be new jobs created. And then you've got what I think is the more realistic view, which is it's just going to be a division in society between a small number of working humans, technology and machines, and then a massive population that just lives on welfare. And that's being proposed. You can look up universal basic income and see that this is a real thing being proposed by politicians. I think that's more likely what would happen, because it's just like today. There's you have a percentage of our society that there's just nothing that they can do to help, and so our governments just give them food stamps or whatever it is that they need. They just give them those things like EBT cards so that they can get what they need. They're not tempted as much to steal or do violence, and they'll just stay out of the way. Just stay out of the market, stay away from the business sector, stay off the school campuses, just stay in their communities, and we'll just mail their free money cards to them. We already do that. That program, it would just expand. Because what's going to happen is, as I said, the AI and the bots are going to create a bar that redefines what it means to work. And anyone who can't work at a level beyond that bar is just going to be useless in that society. We already see this to a degree, but it's going to be far greater, because this AI technology is just going to be revolutionary. I mean, I really can't express how impressive the technology is when someone who is, and this is who it's intended for, an expert in a field. I'm an expert in the field of classical Catholic education. Even Cognia wrote in our review that we're considered the leaders in research and teaching, research and administration in classical Catholic education today. When someone like me, who's working at the philosophical level and administrative level, gets these tools, it's like having an unlimited number of employees. It's like having an unlimited number of servants that need you to throw them a handful of corn kernels, and that's all they need to run. The benefits and the costs are impossible to overestimate. And it's really just a matter of how creative the leaders in different fields are in the use of these resources that determines how much they can accomplish. It's really a challenge of the creative use of these resources, which is why expertise is needed. The philosophical vision is needed for the field. And then the bots come as this army of ready workers, and the challenge is to figure out how to actually employ all of these resources to pursue this philosophical vision. That's really what my work is becoming. And again, we're just beginning to see the technology emerge. It's just beginning to become available, and its effects are already amazing. But what's going to happen is the opportunity for work for those who chose not to study and not to advance and not to prepare and not to move to the top of the pool of available workers, they're just going to be left in the dust. And people will complain about that. People will try to attack and criticize the leaders. It's like Bob Cratchit criticizing Scrooge, for not making a job for him that pays enough and is comfortable enough for him to just live an easy, pleasure-seeking life. And Scrooge is made to be the bad guy. We're going to see that all over modern society as the lazy workers who really have nothing to offer complain that they're being oppressed by those who have studied and worked and continue to develop their skills and have paid attention and have taken advantage of the opportunities. They're going to complain, but it doesn't matter, because there's nothing that they're going to be able to do. And any attempt to try and create an artificial market that pays the incompetent human worker is just going to get thrashed by the market itself, unless the government begins restricting things and actually forcing incompetence upon the society, which it may very well do. But that will never work. And as I said, our society is already beginning to push that out. The real enemy of this development, the enemy is going to be democracy, which just votes fraudsters into office who make absurd, unsustainable promises to people who don't work and don't study and who live contrary to nature, on and on. That's the real evil of democracy. But it just can never compete because the ideas that people have, the political programs, they're just never sustainable. It doesn't matter what the ideas are. They're not sustainable. They can't exist. So that's what I believe is going to happen. So in the short term, for the next generation, in the short term, I believe that the bots are just going to take over, and they're going to push so many people out of work or into really humiliating work conditions where they're doing sub-machine activity. For the next generation, which deserves everything it gets because it's choosing to ignore the people who are warning it of the problem in this generation, and they're just heading down a road that is going to bring them misery, and they deserve every bit of it because they choose it and they see it and they choose it anyway. They choose to follow the liars instead of those who are actually living productive, responsible lives right before their eyes. They choose not to take counsel from wise men. They choose not to listen to virtuous men. They get on the internet and they don't Google how to be wise. They don't Google how to live a successful life, how to become successful in business, how to become successful in learning. They're not Googling how to improve themselves. They're sitting around watching YouTube reruns of SpongeBob from the 1990s. And they're going to get what they deserve. So in the short term, I think the next generation is going to be punished very severely for what they're doing. But the next generation, I believe, is going to have to respond to the challenge. And that's where something's going to happen. And my hope is that as the technology raises the bar of what it means to work, a lot of this modern culture, that this modern generation is going to be bulldozed off the planet. And the next generation is going to be raised in a much stricter, much more responsible, much more mature environment where they're told that you've got to come to this level, you've got to reach this standard, or you're just going to be unemployable. And that's going to be the challenge that I think brings a return and is already beginning to bring a return of respect for meritocracy. Now, of course, I have no idea because, like I said, in a democracy, the people can vote contrary to all goodness and wisdom. They can do whatever they want. They can all rally behind the most foolish, evil person that makes the best promises and vote themselves into total destruction. America can certainly do that, but the signs seem to be suggesting that America is doing the opposite and is actually voting against this self-destruction and is voting for a return to more traditional values. But as I said, those traditional values, with the addition of the developing technology, is going to demand that those values step up creatively and produce a new culture, a new intelligent, industrious culture. And we see models of this in people like Elon Musk. We see people who are intelligent, who are industrious, who are practical, and that's going to set the model for practical affairs, for secular affairs. Now, religious life always remains the alternative to this life, but we're talking about the secular market. Some will say, oh no, Christians believe that. No, Christianity ends primarily in religious life. When you choose to say no to religious life and to enter voluntarily into the married state or into secular vocations, you're subject to the changes of the market. That should be, if young people were taught honestly about vocations, they would be taught that choosing to enter into secular vocations is a very dangerous choice because you have no idea where secular society is going to go. And it's really the responsibility of the Catholic laity to get in front of secular society and direct it to where it should go according to God's will. But Catholic culture does not do that. Catholic culture is part of the problem because it's this lazy, lackadaisical, immature culture where the Catholic laymen are trying to play religion. They play with religion rather than take responsibility for secular affairs, which is their actual vocation. They'll take these bottom of the barrel, lazy jobs and say, this is God's will. Well, if it's God's will, why are you able to quit? Why are you allowed to change jobs? The argument is just religion just becomes an excuse to do less, which is very common. That's part of this modern generation. Anything you do provides an excuse to do less than you should do. So we've got secular men trying to play with religion rather than work. They're the ones who are going to be in trouble. The religious will always be safe because they opt out of this constantly changing secular culture and devote themselves to religion, which is never changing. So the religious will be safe, even though they're going to go through purification themselves because of all of this behind the scenes government subsidizing of all kinds of so-called charity services that really have nothing to do with the church. We'll see what happens with that because there are going to be some significant consequences of what's found with all of this auditing of the U.S. government. But anyway, for those choosing secular vocations, the bar is going to be very high for profitable working. And if you're going to choose to enter into secular life and choose a secular occupation, you better have a plan for how you're going to succeed and contribute in modern secular society, which is going to be changing, I think, faster and faster with technology as we move forward. But for my part, I'm excited about the changes that are coming. I see many benefits for young people who want to study, who want to work. They're going to receive so many benefits from the resources that are developing. Again, I'm beginning to introduce them to my students in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy to help with classical Catholic studies. And those who just aren't on board, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes. There are many parents, I see them every day making choices that are not seeking counsel from people in leadership positions. They're not seeking counsel from leaders in secular fields. They're following their own, religious gurus. And I'm not talking about bishops and priests. I'm talking about people on the internet and homeschool conference speakers, people like that who make money promoting a certain culture. And they're burning bridges, making decisions that are going to set their kids back so far in their own generation. And there's just no stopping them because they believe that what they're doing is actually religious rather than foolish. And there's just nothing you can do to stop them. So anyway, bots are coming. Artificial intelligence is coming. It's going to set the bar for work very high, and it's going to humiliate modern men. And unless men take real studies seriously, and I'm not talking about trivia, which modern education has committed itself to, that's all useless in the bot generation. It was already useless in the Google and the search engine generation. Now that's just going to be amplified 1,000-fold. Encyclopedic learning in modern schools, trivia collecting in modern schools is going to be useless. Useless. What it's going to come down to is a return to classical liberal arts studies, real theology, real philosophy, because men have to get above that bar. And the only way to do it is with real wisdom. And modern schools just don't provide it. Modern students are not seeking it. And to get above that bar, you're going to have real wisdom, real prudence. There's going to be no faking it. So the bots are coming. Artificial intelligence is coming, and it's going to humiliate modern men, but hopefully produce another generation that has all of this junk cleared out and recommits itself to wisdom and diligence in life, to fulfilling human potential. So that's what I think is developing and what's going to happen over the next generation in at least American society as this technology begins to be set to work by leaders in different fields, in all fields, really. I hope that's helpful.